Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, and tonight we have Dr. Joye Pugh on. We're going to talk about From Eden to Armageddon, Beguiled, her book series. A lot of information tonight. I'm going to try to cram as much of it as I can in this 2 hours, but she is a very knowledgeable lady when it comes to biblical research, but not just that. She's going to get into a lot of other things. When we talk about going down the rabbit hole, well, we will tonight when we talk about Beguiled, Eden to Armageddon. All right, be with you in just 1 minute. All right, tonight, Dr. Joye Pugh, thank you for joining me tonight.
Oh, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I have been for all week. I've been like, I started doing some reading. I got my Kindle charged for my audience. I always talk about charging it, and started reading a little bit of the preface of your first book in the Beguiled series. I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
This is, if anybody could read the books behind me, like you cover so many topics, I believe, just reading the prefaces of what you get into the book. Oh no, I lost her right away. Oh, I had her on for the last 20 minutes and getting ready for the show, and she dropped. Let me send her another invite. Tonight we will get into the World Wide Web of Weird. I got quite a bit to get into while I work on getting our guests back. I don't know what happened. Of course, right when we start the show, I lose her. Oh, there she is. Okay.
It said I got removed from this call. I don't know what happened.
It wasn't me. All right. So yeah, I was afraid. I'm like, oh my God, dropped you right in the middle of that. But we'll get the ball rolling and get into the World Wide Web here in a second. But I want to read a little bit about Dr. Joye here. Dr. Joye had a supernatural dream at the age of 6 about the end of times, and her 40 years of research into dreams allowed her to tell the world what is about to happen in our generation. You have a book series called Beguiled, Eden to Armageddon, volume 1, 2, and 3. But you've also written a couple other books as well. Eden, the knowledge of good and evil, 666, and this one is another one. Reading your Bible, your bio, I have to try to get this book. Is Antichrist, the clone image of Jesus Christ? Is this book still in print?
No, it's not in print, and so I incorporated the information that was in that first book into the Eden book and also into the Beguiled series.
So a lot of that's all covered.
Yeah, it really is all kind of really covered in these other books. Because I felt like that was the foundation that I started building on, and so I didn't want to leave it behind. A lot of authors will start on something, and then you've got to go back and read every one of them. But I've tried to bring my research forward and just keep expanding the information in regard to it. It's just so much. And back in the day, that was a small book because there was just a little bit of tidbits of information about these kinds of things. Now I find this information everywhere. So it went from a small book like that to the Eden book, which is extremely a big book. And then I was going to do another book, and it got so big, that the Beguiled series became a 3-volume series to get it all in there. So it's pretty extensive.
Well, I want to continue so people get an idea before we get in the World Wide Web of Weird about your bio. Dr. Joye received her doctorate from Nova University, her master's and bachelor's degree from, how do you say that, Valdosta State College, and her associates from South Georgia College. Her research interests include ancient history, archaeology, astronomy, physics, biblical prophecy, secret societies, paganism, demonology, biotechnology, the human pineal gland, the origins and manipulations of sound waves, nanotechnology, cloning, modified foods, vaccinations, Ebola, Marburg, and other hot, I think I said that wrong, hot viruses, as well as government control, unexplained phenomena such as UFOs, animal mutilations, crop circles, strange weather patterns, plagues, electromagnetic anomalies, world religions, theology, politics, and the Holy Shroud of Turin. You're also a consultant for MUFON as well?
Yes, I have been that for quite a number of years.
Wow. That I had to read your bio. I don't always read all their bio, but when I saw that, when you sent me the guest request, I was like, oh my God, yeah, I totally have to have this lady on my show. You're like,
Well, there's very few things that I have not, like I said earlier, that I have not seen or heard or experienced or had someone close enough that I trusted the information they were giving me, that I haven't, like, haven't seen most anything that might be paranormal or heard about those paranormal activities out in the world.
well, then you should be good for you to join in on the World Wide Web of Weird. So let me get that a rolling here.
Okay.
All right, tonight on the World Wide Web of Weird, we got some UFOs. We got I'm gonna go back to a Bigfoot sighting I talked about a couple months ago, and a ghost on a horse. So on the World Wide Web, we're gonna start off with, we have a UFO over Manchester Airport taking off. This is gonna be a fast one for people to see. The footage was uploaded on YouTube by David Ball in the hope of finding what the unusual flying object could be. Let me mute this here. In this UFO flying through is this a UFO flying through the skies of Manchester? The clip was taken by a holidaymaker as he took off from the city's airport and shows unusual white lines stream through the air and then disappear quickly. Let me get this ad off here. Anybody that is listening to this, because this is going on as podcast as well, just go to my YouTube channel and look for my World Wide Web of Weird channel itself, playlist, and you will find these videos on there. All right, so you'll see a plane, it's taken off. The footage was uploaded, like I said, by David Ball from Shorten. I don't know. In the hope of finding out what the strange flying object could be. It's really quick what goes by on the screen. It's going to happen here in a second, and they'll slow it down and rewind it and play it back. But it's way too, I don't know. It looks like it's super fast. It could be some misidentification. I doubt it could be birds. They look too big. They look too fast. But tell me what you think when you see it, Joy. It'll be coming up. Can you see it on the screen?
I haven't seen it yet.
All right.
I just see your paranormal. Okay.
Let me lock it on my screen too.
Okay.
Let me hit play. It's going to come up here in just a sec. All right, they're rewinding it because that's how fast it goes. I think they slow it down. Oh, let's see what again. It's really fast.
Okay, all I'm seeing is your paranormal. Okay.
Hold on. I'm going to play it again. It's seeing what it looks like. I mean, it looks like it's like actual like projectiles or something going by the
For some reason, I'm just getting your Paranormal Soup little icon.
Oh, that might be the feed then.
Okay.
Sometimes it does that if it's feeding out wrong. Let me make sure I got everything.
I can see it, but then it goes back to your Paranormal Soup icon.
Let me try. I hit one more thing that might help, but it could be just a signal. That's why it happens. But I'll show it one more time for the audience that's watching. They streak by super fast, and maybe it could be birds. I don't know. But my one thing is, this is like the third time I've shown UFO footage taken from an airplane. He said he didn't see it while he's flying. Thank God, because if I did see something I didn't understand while I was flying in a plane, I'm gonna, you know what, my pants, because I'm already nervous enough about being on a plane, but I do not want to see a UFO on a plane at all. I saw one video I never showed on the World Wide Web of Weird of a guy gets this huge UFO, and I'm like, it's totally CG fake. And one of the reasons I know is that if I saw that filming out, I would be freaking out. I wouldn't be quiet, breathing while I'm filming this huge UFO out my window. I'd be like, oh my God, and it'd be like a scene from Airplane. People coming up and slapping me.
It's quite interesting that I can't see this because it's not coming up for me to look at. But
yeah,
this phenomena is very much and has been recorded in a lot of case studies that MUFON have in their archives in regard to people who have seen things while really in flight, and there are a lot of testimony.
Oh yeah,
not only by airline pilots, but you've got military Air Force people who, after maybe they retired and were either on their deathbed or something, who've told some really strange, unique stories. Yes, so
even astronauts now.
It's easy to say if you're just quickly looking at something. It can be birds and it can be reflection. I've had people send me things that look like reflections because it's so fast, and it can appear that way. But the thing that's always important, and I encourage people, that whenever you see anything, or you write it down and you submit it to MUFON, because what happens is it might have been something that you saw. Let's say I live in Georgia, but yet
Right.
somebody else, as it goes across the country, may see it at different times, and so it can be tracked. And it's important from a scientific standpoint to get this stuff in an orderly fashion and not just pass it off. If something you see you just don't really know about, I really try to encourage people to go to MUFON's website and fill out that information. You don't have to, if you don't want to be contacted, whatever, you can stay anonymous. The main thing is to get the information, that's right, in an archive form, so that there can be a scientific study of this. Something major is going on and it needs to be, looked at.
What I find interesting from a lot of these reports that have been filed over so many years now is how many of these UFOs are spotted along the 33rd parallel.
Oh, yes. Well, that might my research into megalithic builders and the ley lines
along those.
Oh, yes, are they're called dragon nodes. It's the path of the dragons. So, yes, that's very interesting. That does happen a lot.
All right, so the next one's a ghost story. This is a ghost on horseback, and this is another one from England, English graveyard. Let me pull up the video here. Are you most likely to see a ghost in a graveyard? Of course, but not many graveyards. This article comes from, let's see. This is Yahoo News. This is the one. Trying to tell that an amateur photographer, Richard Durham, captured a specter on horseback in a snap he took in Weedon Beck Cemetery in Daventry, North Hampshire on New Year's Day. The 45-year-old gardener from nearby Boothville was testing out his new camera at about 9 a.m. when he took the picture of what appears to be a ghostly figure on top of a ghostly steed among some headstones. But it wasn't until the father of three posted the image on Facebook that he found out about his frightening contact. A friend saw the image and pointed out to the ghostly writer, to Mr. Durham, who couldn't believe he missed it the first time around. I do believe in ghosts, but never thought I would ever capture one on camera. I really, this has been going around YouTube. I see it, but I think it's matrixing of the trees. Maybe I'm being a little too skeptical on the picture, but I don't know. Everybody go watch this on my, it's right now, it's on tonight's show, but I'll be putting it on the World Wide Web of Weird playlist. Check this video out. Tell me what you think. I think matrixing. I'm sure I'm gonna get some comments from my chat room on that. But it's not clear enough to me, and I think the trees are giving an optical illusion. It's an interesting story. I mean, he took the picture and later somebody else spots it, but that's how matrixing works. I mean, some people are like, oh, it's a graveyard, I'm gonna look really hard for a ghost. I'm sure you're gonna find one. As a paranormal investigator, I hate saying that. I don't want to sound like a cynic, but it really does look like matrixing to me. So that one's been going around. I wanted to talk about. All right. The next article is mysterious bright lights over Canberra. Was a UFO exiting a Stargate portal? Not ball lightning phenomena, UFO hunters say. This comes from January 5th, article by John Thomas Didymus. Let me get to the right video, though. There it is. And mysterious bright lights that lit up the skies momentarily over Canberra, Australia during a thunderstorm on Sunday has sparked an online debate over UFO enthusiasts challenged the claim by astronomers and meteorologists that it was only an incident of rare, mysterious atmospheric ball lightning phenomenon. That's usually the common blame for ball lightning, or for UFOs is ball lightning. I mean, we've been hearing that since the 60s, but it's not something I understand very well. This video goes really quick. Let me put it back up. According to UFO enthusiasts, scientists are trying to cover up yet another incident of extraterrestrial UFO phenomenon, this time a UFO exiting a space-time interdimensional portal by claiming that the ball of light was an occurrence of rare and little understood ball lightning. It's weird. I wish you could see it, Joy, if you can't.
I can't, because it comes up and then it flashes and leaves the screen before I can see it. It doesn't run.
Hey, at least you're here. But it's interesting because it turns green, and that's not typical of the ball lightning phenomenon. Even the scientists admitted that.
No, typically, I have seen meteorites do that.
Meteorites, yes.
That will come in like a bolide that will have a white, maybe then a bluish color, and then actually turn a very strange green color before it either goes completely out or it kind of explodes.
It's weird. It pops up like this this ball, like just suddenly just out of nowhere in the middle of the air, and no way it's a meteor, just pops up out of nowhere, and it like does this like kind of puff cloud, like somebody blowing a smoke ring, and after it lights up. It's really weird. I don't think I've ever really witnessed ball lightning, but from my descriptions of it, I didn't think it would look like that. And I don't know. And I don't think scientists are trying to cover up anything. I think they just say, well, I don't know what it is, but it's probably ball lightning. Because they're not going to say it's a UFO.
Can't really, that's right. When you don't really know what it is, we find that the scientific community finds other possibilities. They theorize because most of them do not want to get locked into the UFO discussion.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that has cost people their jobs. So when you start talking about an unidentified object, and really it's unidentified until it's identified, you can look at it two different ways. You don't have to look at it that we're talking about little space guys and aliens from Mars.
For the government. I don't think they
right.
I don't think they call them UFOs. I think they know exactly what they are. All right.
I said they call them identified flying objects, IFOs.
Yeah, IFOs, yep. All right, this next one, I showed this video a couple months ago, might have been longer, but I always say I try to keep looking into these things, and I found an article with a statement from the guy who took this video. Let me get the audio going on this one. Even though I'm trying to do this podcast, I am going to play the audio off of this because you can hear his breathing because he's scared. And he sees a UFO, the Bigfoot out in the background. And he books. So this is the article is about, this is what his statement was. I was up on American Fork Canyon near Tibble Creek Reservoir in Utah. I thought I saw something a few minutes before when I was a little further away. It kind of scared me, but I figured it was probably just a moose, elk, or maybe a bear. The area is pretty forested, and I wasn't quite sure where the animal was. I only saw it for a second before it disappeared behind some trees. I had to walk through some snow and trees to get where I started the recording. I saw moving in the trees, and that's when I moved the camera to capture whatever it is. I was scared already, but when it stepped into the clearing outside the trees, lost my spot here. I was absolutely terrified. Well, yeah, I would be too if I saw a big hairy beast out in the middle of the woods by myself. I only saw it for a second before I ran. The video captured more than I can remember. I only remember it being the most massive animal I have seen, and I think about it without. I can't think about it without shaking. I don't want to say that it was for sure a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, but I don't know what else it could be. I spent a lot of times outdoors hiking, and I've never seen a Bigfoot or believed they could have been possible. So I showed that video, like I said, a few months ago. And there was no story to it. It was just a video on YouTube, and I always hate it. I play those scenes, and if I told you if I find the story, I put it up. That's accordingly his statement, what he saw. He obviously was scared in this video. I think he was. I think I called maybe a shenanigans, but I definitely felt the fear seemed a bit real. And to me, that's an honest reaction. If you see a big hairy man in the woods, you don't probably stand there and keep filming. You probably do run, if you're by yourself at least. So I could see that as a genuine reaction. So that was my World Wide Web of Weird. Oh, well, no, there's one more thing. I'm going to do some more research on this. I don't know how many of you have seen this. I'll put the audio back on here in a second. It's a strange video that's been circulating for a year or more. Hear the creepy music? It's called 11BX1371. And you see this guy in this video making all these weird hand gestures. He's in one of those plague outfits. You know, remember Joy, what was that?
Yeah.
The long nose and the little eyes, that face mask they'd wear.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he's wearing, and he's in an abandoned building. Well, what's interesting is that there is spectrogram of the audio in it. Not only are there hidden messages that he's doing with these hand signals and stuff, the audio that you hear in it is a message. This audio. When you convert it into a spectrogram, it actually has words and leaves a message. It says, let's see, you are something. Hold on. It takes forever to read it. It's a long message, but it's more like you are in prison, whatever, something along the lines. You know, this is one of those government conspiracy kind of deals, I believe. But I'm gonna look more into it. It's more likely somebody's very elaborate, created kind of hoax, or whatever you want to call it. But man, they put a lot of work into this.
Some of these people just amaze me at some of the things that they come up with to hoax, which really upsets me because I have a scientific
Yeah,
desire to know the truth, and it when they start doing the hoaxing, then
Joy,
it takes away from trueness.
I'm right there with you. I hate hoaxers, but I don't know if you could classify this as a hoax or what it's about, because there's no like direct like meaning to anything. It's all symbolism and stuff. Even in the spectrogram, there's somebody being tortured. You can see an image of somebody being tortured. That's complex to take audio noise to turn it into a spectrogram image. You can see
Well, long time ago, you really was very difficult to hoax something, because if you were taking pictures, you could tell whether something had been, overlaid or whatever. Today's technology is so advanced that if you're really good with technology, you can make something really look and sound authentic.
It's very disturbing video. And I should pre-warn people before they've seen this. The spectrogram shows a woman being tortured and killed.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I want to know more about that. I don't care about all the New World Order conspiracy crap. I want to know, did somebody just make a snuff film and put it out there?
Sure.
Because it's creepy. It's really creepy. They found the spot where they filmed it too. So anybody else that has any more information on 11BX1371, please email me or send me a message on Facebook. I'd like to hear more. I just found out about this recently, and I find this really disturbing and weird. So that's how I'm going to end the World Wide Web. All right, let's get to my guest, Dr. Joye Pugh. Well, thank you so much, Joy, for coming on my show.
Oh, listen, I'm just tickled to be a part of this tonight. And of course, like you say, the things that we've just seen that you brought to the table are quite interesting. And I think it's things that people need to be aware of that could be real, and what to do if they do see something that they think is strange. They need to go to, the scientific aspect of it and try to get it out to the people that can investigate and make case studies of it, because that's the only way we're going to be able to continue to grow in understanding the paranormal realm. If we just turn our backs to it and pretend it's not real, then we're losing a lot of credible people that are trying to maybe tell something. Like we mentioned earlier, I just cannot stand somebody that hoax, and I have to spend time on things that somebody sends me for 2 or 3 days and then find out it was a joke. I don't like doing research on jokes.
I've looked it right in the face, because as a paranormal investigator, I've had people come up to me and go, I got this ghost photo. Let me show you. And it's an app with a fake ghost photo, and they'll like try to play it off. I've had it happen a couple times, and I'm like, you did this on your phone, because I can see right where it came from.
Right.
Right. And they're like, oh, and then they go, yeah, haha. I'm like, why do it? Why? What's the point? I mean, for somebody right up there just wants to see if they're testing me, I think, to see how good investigator I am. Hey, I could be fooled like anybody.
Sure.
We all can be fooled nowadays. We're in a land of illusion, and anything digitally can be faked and done and fool some of the smartest people.
Sure, it can. And you can be misled by something that you really think might be authentic. And I'll give you a prime example, because I have actually witnessed and seen what I believe were true unidentified flying objects that may be not of this world in my lifetime. I've tried to look at it from a standpoint of scientific, being able to keep a level head, look at, what's going on around me, the date, time, how everything feels. I mean, there's a whole process of scientific investigation when you see something like this. But one morning I had gotten up to go to church and had gone out of my driveway, and I saw a silver reflection way back on the other side of a farm from where I live. And it was reflecting in the sun, most unusual. And I had never, ever noticed anything in that particular field and the way it was on the ground. And of course, I was playing music there at the church. And so I didn't want to take off down through the field when I needed to be where I needed to be. So I went on. But I promised myself on the way back that I was going to investigate that and find out what it was, what was reflecting in that, across that huge field that was giving that kind of reflection that time of the morning. And I made a track across that field and found out that there was a windmill that somebody had for years and years and years. And it was just that the sun on that particular morning, at that particular time, that the sun had hit that, and it was, it was reflecting in the sunlight.
Full explanation.
Yeah. But, when when people see things like I saw that, I could have turned it in as a report because it was unusual. It was something that had never been. I've been out there 1,000 times and never seen that happen. So it's important to not get hyped up about it, but to really look at it from what is it, what's going on. And some people say, I can't believe that you went over there by yourself to find out what it was. And I'm like, I just have this thing, this scientific desire in me to know the truth. So I guess if it had been something else, I would have run into it and dealt with it, and like I say, having seen some really unusual things very close, really close, and know that if it was something that our military has and a black budget kind of thing, and it's a hidden whatever, quite amazing. And of course, I'm like to the point that if we've got that kind of technology that I have actually seen with my eyes, then what are we messing around with Putin, any of these people? Because what I saw would take care of whatever the problem was. We wouldn't have the Benghazis. We wouldn't have all these things that are happening if we can use the technology that I've seen in the skies here.
Wow, we could go down a rabbit hole right there on that one. But I don't want to. I want to focus a little bit on, because I find it really interesting, is your book series Beguiled, Eden to Armageddon. Now this is really tie into what I read at the beginning. You had a dream when you were 6 years old of Armageddon.
Yes, it does. It really is what started me a long time ago wanting to know about the end of days. I grew up on a small farm and went to the same church that I still am a member of today. My grandmother was a Sunday school teacher, and my other grandmother was a piano player at another church that I visited as well. But, back in the days when I grew up, you didn't really see like the movies like Armageddon and things that were like that. Of course, we had what you would call the hell and fire brimstone kind of preachers. But a child with 6 years old, that typically I watched things like Lassie on TV. We only had one channel to watch back in those days out on the farm. Yeah, and so we didn't get too much other than like Lawrence Welk. Yeah, I mean, it was simple things, the Three Stooges, but nothing that you would see would be like dramatic.
Right.
And for me to go to sleep that night and to have dreamed this particular dream was enough to wake me up and make me aware that something strange, that I had seen something strange. And of course, I went to my grandmother and immediately wanted to join the church because I felt like it was something very significant. And, when you're 6 years old, back in the day, people thought you needed to be like 12 or 13. They considered that kind of the age of accountability. So she was like, don't worry about that. Don't be upset about that. It was probably just a dream. And she says, just continue to be in your fantasy world. You got a long time to worry about other things. But, I never could, Jason, because I knew that it was something very unusual and quite unnerving as a child to have seen what I saw. And it was such destruction. And I felt that there was something very significant about it. It was not like any other dream I ever had. And the fact that the dream would not leave me, that it would stay there and I would find myself pondering on it. And then, I would ask the preacher or I would ask other Sunday school teachers a million questions. In fact, there was one Sunday school teacher that I had that he would, after I got out of my grandmother's Sunday school class, he would come to her and say, where does she find these questions? I can't keep up with her in Sunday school. I started to study my lesson 10 times because I don't know which kind of questions you're going to ask. But it was not that I was trying to be a smart person or act like a smarty. I was just wanting to know the truth. And I guess that was the thing that drove me into the research that I've done. And most of the research that I did in my early years was on my own because I didn't know anybody else to ask about it. And nobody seemed to know the answers. So it drove me to try to find the answers for myself. So my research really started out having a lot of questions about the end of time and trying to find the answers to satisfy me as to what I had seen. So when I started doing books and whatever, this is my research that I was doing to really prove to myself about the end of days and what did that mean as far as me and why we're here and that kind of stuff. So I wasn't out to sell a book. I was out to answer questions for myself, and then I just put it in a book. So I didn't want to fake anybody. I'm not going to fake myself out. I'm not going to hoax myself. Yeah. So my intent was to to really find the answers to these tough questions that nobody could answer.
Well,
And that's what my whole life's been about, is to answer these questions.
that's what I love about your approach to what I'm seeing. Like I said, I'll be honest with you, I haven't finished the book. I just started the first one, but I really love to see that. I like the approach that you have, is that, yeah, you were raised as a Christian, but your approach is like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get down to what I can, what is the real meaning? What is the truth? I'm not going to just take what, everybody else takes at Sunday school. I want to know more,
That's right.
And I love that approach. I love that you just don't take a simple answer to a big question. You go deep in.
It drove a lot of my teachers crazy throughout the years, and probably don't say some kind things if they're still alive about, she wouldn't shut up, or she would just keep asking questions. And in fact, in one class, I had a professor just finally look at me and say, "That's the way it is, and that's the way I'm telling you it is. In other words, don't ask another question." And I didn't ask another question. And then I had another professor that in my doctorate, and they'd already told me, they said, people in the class, and Joy, that you cannot ask this man a question. He's going to put you under the table. Well, me, halfway through I think we had an 8-hour lecture that day. Halfway through it, I decided to ask a question because I didn't agree with what he was saying. I felt like there was more to it. I had experienced some things, so I raised my hand and started, and he said it very quietly. In fact, he never made contact with the class's eyes. He kept, looking down, doing his whatever readings. And I finished, and then he put me under the under the table. He totally destroyed everything that I was trying to explain to him that I had actually witnessed. And then, of course, when we all went to break, one of my friends that was from a county not too far, he was the school superintendent. He laughed and he said, Joy, I cannot believe that you challenged this man. And he was a professor that had been very high in the United States government. He was on the education committee that really did for our government for educating children. And I'll never forget, Gary said, when I saw you stick your hand up, he said, I wanted to go in there and grab it really quick. And he says, honey, I felt so sorry for you, because he just chewed you up and spit you out, chewed you up and spit you out. But even though he did that, it didn't discourage me, because what I was trying to tell him was really true information. But he had formed such an opinion because he was so directed, he was so blinded by his own research that he couldn't see outside the box. Thank the Lord, and I praise the Lord for this, that he's never kept me from being able to see outside the box, because there's so many things in different areas of study. Every field of study that I've had the opportunity to study and research in has golden nuggets that point toward why we're here. There's an agenda. And if you can get past the blinders, like you put on a horse and they just go straight ahead, if you can get past those blinders, then you can start seeing these pieces to this puzzle. And that is how my research is. That's why it involves so many aspects, because if you just look at this one thing only, you're missing so much more that explains it in so much more detail that makes it all have sense. And of course, I think it's all been broken up conspiracy-wise to keep us from knowing the truth.
Yeah, it's been compartmentalized, they lead you in one direction to lead you away from another.
Exactly.
Show you what's going on in the right hand, but you don't know what's going on the left.
Exactly.
And I don't think it's just governmental. It's been that way, with religion itself throughout history.
It's been that way in religion. It's been that way in science. It's been that way in government. I mean, it's like you said, it's been that way in every aspect. And in some things, I think it's been maybe not intentional in some aspects, but in other aspects, I think it's been very intentional.
I think there's an intentional aspect, more modern days with our government. But I think throughout history, it's a psychological thing too.
Well, and then too, when you go back and I study a lot about the beginning of Eden and what happened, in the beginning of time in Genesis and things like that, I know that stories have been told to teach children. So you can't sometimes come out and tell it like it really is. You kind of got to powder it up so it's not too much for their mind. Okay. But then after a while, if you don't look at the real truth, and you teach that real truth, then the foundation that you lay on and build your processes of thinking, if it's still on that childhood kind of mixed up little story, then you're not building your foundation correctly, and then you lose sight of what the whole story is. And so that's where I think that people have played the game to teach you something, but then they just didn't follow through on the whole story.
Well, instead of starting with the end and talk about Armageddon, I want to talk a little bit about your ideas on Eden.
Oh, listen, when I started studying Revelation a long time ago, you kept, if you read the book of Revelation, and that was something that was really important to me when I turned about 12 or 13 years of age. I read Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth. And for the first time, I was like, oh my goodness, somebody understands what I think I saw in this dream. And of course, that, along with beginning to read the book of Revelation, and people would say, oh, it's just symbols, it's just this, nobody knows how to understand. I'm like, okay, I cannot believe that there's not something that God has put in place for us to understand. I mean, it's not supposed to be where you can't understand it. You have different layers in that Bible, and it will prove different things. And the more you study it, the more you will gain knowledge. You can read something 1,000 times, but then it's that 1,001 time that it just clicks, because now you've either found some of the information within other aspects of that Bible that will lend itself to prove something. So what happened was, in doing the research on Revelation and end of days, I kept coming up with this thing: adultery, whoredom, mixing, not pure. All this, why was this like this serpent? And it's the same serpent that was in the Garden of Eden. Okay, so I'm like, oh, the serpent in the Garden of Eden? Well, let me go back to my little Bible story and think about that Adam and Eve ate an apple and they encountered a snake. Okay, so one day I sat down and I thought, well, if I'm going to understand the end of days, you got to understand how it all began. Because we've gone from losing paradise to gaining paradise. Something caused this whole aspect of history between the days that we were created until the days that we see paradise again. Why all this? Why are we here? And when I sat down and started looking at, like I would do Revelation, I wouldn't just read it all through. You've got to read each word, because each word is very important. And then if you really want to know the true meaning of the word, you got to go down to what's the Hebrew and the Greek, or the Greek of this word, especially if it's in Revelation. And then once, go ahead.
As I say, I was going to ask you how much you get into the translation.
You have to.
Aspect. You're right. You go, because it's been translated. How many? I'm not an expert. How many times can you tell us the Bible's been translated?
It's been translated so many times. I mean, and the bad thing is, even in the translations, you can lose some commonality as to what was the original. So going back and trying to get your concordances and things that really go back and try to pick up on the first translations that were occurring, or the first scrolls that were actually found, that's very, very important to do that. Because if you can get to the true word, and unfortunately, there are words in Hebrew and there are words in the Greek that we don't have a word for in the English language. So when people say, oh, well, King James, he just picked those words out of thin air and he retranslated it, Well, he didn't have a word sometimes that would match the perfect word that was in the Greek or in the Hebrew. So he had to choose another word. Well, the prime example of that is when I started looking at the Garden of Eden, because what I had found in doing that in Revelation was words like the word beast became an icon, and that it meant a certain kind of, like a statuesque kind of being that was in an iconic image. Well, that's a little different than you would think about a beast out there. And the same thing when I went back and looked at the Garden of Eden, where it said that Eve ate with a serpent. And when you look at the word ate, unfortunately, most people don't. The Hebrew true concordance on that means she had sex with a serpent. Okay, when I found that out, I was like, whoa, what does this mean? I've never heard this before. I mean, I sat at the table where I had all my books and research laid out, and I sat there and I kept, like you mentioned earlier, I'm going, I want to know the truth. Don't pass out on this. I want to know what does this mean? You know, what does this really mean? And so the more that I began to look at that, it started to kind of like, the more words I started looking at, what it was Hebrew for this and Hebrew for that, and what did it mean when you saw your father's nakedness, and da 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 da. And all of a sudden, it made sense to me, because I'd always wondered why it was that God would cast us out for eating an apple. And then the bad thing was, when I looked at the scriptures, the word apple is not even in the Genesis account of what happened there. The other thing I noticed quickly was that the word, which I'd always seen in all the pictures, a snake was in the apple tree, you know, giving Eve the apple. And I always thought, okay, that's a snake. Well, that's not what it was. It was a serpent. And then when you start finding out what does the serpent mean, and how does that tie to the serpent that was, of course, told us that was in at the end of days in Revelation, how does that all pan out together? Immediately, I was able to see this is the same character, you know. And of course, he's going to be there at the end. So he's been here all the time. And he showed up here in the garden. And what was it he was trying to do? What was it? What is this whoredom, this mixing, these lineages, this wheat and tares? I mean, we hear all these parables and stuff. And I had heard, you know, pastors preach on this stuff, but it still just didn't make sense. And, you know, when I would ask questions when I was growing up, you know, raise my hand in Sunday school. Well, who did Cain marry? Oh my gosh, they'd want to run out the door. But I'm like, okay, there had to be, what happened here? So these are the kind of questions that I started asking myself, not from a standpoint, again, of trying to fool myself, of really wanting to know, is there an answer out there? Can you literally prove, who did he marry? What was going on? Why was he the way he was? Why did he kill his brother? Where did the psychological aspect of killing come from? Because a creator would not have made that as a part of humanity.
That was always my question about Cain. You know,
yes.
That makes sense. How does Cain happen to be the way he is? You know, so is Cain the because I always knew about the real meaning, because you know, I'm not an expert, but I've always been interested of her with Eve and the serpent, is that it wasn't really her eating an apple, it was more them
having sexual relationship.
And so is Cain possibly the son of the serpent?
Yes. And you know, the thing about it is, the Bible tells us that. It says that the father of Cain is the serpent. And when you go back and you start looking at these scriptures that's been there all the time, that people would say, well, that meant he followed after his, you know, Satan. Well, in every other aspect of the passages, when you talk about the father of so-and-so, the father of so-and-so, it's their father. And then when you look at the lineage, this is what got me. Cain is not mentioned in the lineage of Adam.
Because he wouldn't be his son.
Because he wasn't his son.
But
he had to raise that child, because a serpent is a beast, and that serpent was not going to raise that child. So it meant that he had to be put out of the Garden of Eden. He had to till the ground for his family. And his wife was to look to him for their food, for their ability to survive. And when you look at what was the curse, you know, we find that Adam and Eve, when they were created in the garden, were innocent. They didn't have any problems. They didn't have anything that they needed. Everything was provided for them. So what was it that this serpent wanted from Eve? He wanted a lineage. He wanted his own tree. And when you look at the tree of life, which we know is considered Jesus, and you look at the tree of knowledge of good and evil, we know that's Satan. So to be able to manifest in the physical, to fight against what God had created, he had to form his own lineage. And once you see that lineage come out of Eden, and you see that lineage that was Cain's lineage, how it's gone through history, and then the lineage that came out of Adam and Eve through Seth, because Abel, you know, was killed, by Cain. Then you see, why did these so-called giants come upon the earth? What caused the flood? It makes sense then to everything that you've had a question about, where people would say, well, when the sons of sons of God came upon the daughters of man in Genesis 6, chapter 6, people would try to say, oh, those were, that was just the daughters of Adam going with the sons of Cain. It was not that. And when you start looking at the true meaning of what it was, there were these fallen angels that were having sexual relations. They learned that aspect of doing that from Satan, their follower. That's who they followed. That's the Bible tells us that. And if you look at the book of Jude, and that's a small book right before Revelation, and it had always been just, I'd read it and read it and read it. What was this talking about? That there are these clouds without water and these feasts of whatever. When you start looking at what it was talking about, then you understand that it was telling you right there that these things were going on back in the days when those fallen angels were cast out of heaven for doing what Satan had led them to do, and that these beings existed. We know they existed. We've got the archaeological proof of that. My books handle the understanding of those two lineages, how they've gone, how they went to the flood, how they got past the flood through Noah, and DNA and reconstituting DNA, scientific proof. I do it from a scientific standpoint, but the Bible tells us that even King David, he dealt with these giants. He came upon them, and it said it was a remnant.
The Nephilim. Is that what you're referencing then?
Yes. And so those beings existed before the flood. They were the reason for the flood, and they existed after the flood through the DNA that was able to cross over. So I try to show this from a scientific standpoint, not just saying, here, look at the scripture. My books will have the scripture in there that you can go back and you can pull your King James Bible and look at it, along with the Hebrew words, or if it's in the Greek, whichever, if it's New Testament, Old Testament. And then to try to bring in other aspects. There's the book of Enoch. There's other things, the book of Jubilees. There's all these other things that also prove this as well.
Really quickly on that, the book of Enoch. That's what I was going to ask you is, you have the Bible, but have you gotten into the apocryphal texts, the ones that were kicked out of the Bible? How much do you put stoke in those at all?
Well, I have tried to read every aspect of those. I have tried to go into look at those things with an open mind. Again, there's tidbits of information in all this information. The problem you've got is that if you get locked up into what I would call the satanic lineage's way of keeping up with their history versus the Hebraic pure lineage that came out of the Garden of Eden and the history that's written in the Bible, there's two histories. And once you see how they wrote this up and then how the Christians wrote theirs up, then you can see that this is the history of the wheat and this is the history of the tares. But does that mean that the history that they've written is wrong? Most of it is how they have perceived it, because they follow the satanic aspect of God. To them, Lucifer is their God, where Jehovah, I am, Creator God, Father, is of course the group that came out with Seth's lineage and went, of course, through Noah and then Shem and Japheth, and then of course Ham and his descendants ended up getting back involved and reconstituting the DNA across the flood, and then they had the serpent lineages again. And proof of that is now, because we have such great ability with internet coverage, is to be able to go over and look at just the archaeological finds that are in Egypt. Here we've got these strange looking beings that are all the pharaohs. Oh, and my research shows that these elongated skulls and all this, these serpentine features, were a part of the serpent lineage.
Yeah, that goes back to like Akhenaten. I would say, if I say it wrong, the father of Tutankhamun. He switched to a one god monotheism. Instead of having the paganism, like religion in Egypt, he slips to a monotheistic religion where they worship the sun. And, they tried to almost erase his memory once he was, off the throne. His son reigned for a very short period of time. But I always wonder in that time of history, what really happened? Was he bringing about some evil order, or was he actually trying to bring along kind of the same message as Jesus Christ was at that time, to worship one God? Or was the one God Lucifer? What really happened back then? And some people have made stipulations thinking that he could be the real Moses, that he was possibly an inspiration for the story of Moses. Not to say that I believe that, but those pharaohs with he was totally different than the other pharaohs of his time. Not just because of his religious beliefs, but because of that elongated skull, the almost the pot belly. If you see any other pharaohs of those time periods, they try to make themselves look strong and statuesque. And at Newton had the long skull and the pot belly and was alien looking. So there's something that happened in that time period I'm extremely fascinated with when it comes to the pharaohs.
We can look back and say, there was Joseph that was there in Egypt. We know that Moses, carried him away from the Pharaoh. We know about the Red Sea, the part in the Red Sea, and that God was trying to get his people out from under them. It's not that God was not aware that Satan had this lineage, but he had to keep his people pure. And that was one of the reasons, if you go back and read the first 4 books of the Bible, especially in Leviticus. Oh man, those poor people, what they had to live under, but it was for pureness. It was for the purity of the race, because if you had not had that pure race to the date that Jesus was born, and he could not have, if he'd had any kind of mixture within him, then he could not have gone to the cross. His blood would not have been redemptive to the ability to die without sin, so that he could purge what happened in the garden. With that first birth, there had to be a process involved in that. So, we know that Moses was raised by the pharaohs. Moses was Hebrew. He was a pure lineage from Seth, and then of course from Shem, that was with the lineage of Noah. And then we know that if you look back and you think about even Abraham. We think about he had two children. Of course, Isaac had Jacob.
Right.
And then Jacob, of course, had 12 sons, and Jacob was renamed Israel. And a lot of people think when we talk about the Israelites, they're talking about the Israelites that we have today when they try to manifest that word. But the true Israelites, or the true Hebrews, were the sons of Jacob. He was just renamed Israel. And the fact that those tribes were actually put under the Pharaoh, and during that time it was a very strange time. But the thing that's most important is when God would tell, like Moses and them, to leave and go to the promised land and do this kind of stuff, when they would come upon these other aspects of people, he would say, kill every man, woman, and child, including their animals. The reason he did this is because they were mixed with these serpent traits. They weren't human. They were terrors. They look like us. They act like us. They do a lot of things that are similar to us. But, Jason, they still exist today. And they look like us. They act like us. But they are the ones, like the pharaohs, who oversaw everybody else. They're the elite. They're the royals. That's why they had the elongated skulls. And they have just continued to manifest their DNA to look more and more like us, so they don't stand out as much. So you don't pick them out like we could have years ago. The unearthing of it is amazing to prove it.
I know you've heard this before, but this is a subject that's come up on the show numerous times, is that you're getting down the same path of kind of like what David Icke has gotten into with the reptilian stuff. I know you've heard it before. You had to, of the interview.
Yes, and I've read all of David's work, and he let me just say this: as far as research, I do think he is a very a good researcher.
Yeah.
But he loses the aspect of the difference between the wheat and the tares. He loses the aspect of coming out of the garden and the manifestation of how that has run biblically. I don't think he is. I don't think he is a religious person.
No. Well,
And when you don't see the aspect, I'm fortunate because I can see the aspect of not being religious, but the fact that I am religious and have seen and read and studied that area, then like I say, I can see the two together without the blinders on. And I think sometimes that's where he's missing, is that he's got his blinders on about the religious aspect of it.
Well,
But
I could be right.
It's very real.
I think the problem with David is he doesn't know, he doesn't have a religion to turn to believe in. You know what I'm saying? He has all these questions and all this research, and he has his own stipulations and theories of what he thinks it means. But I think he's formed his own kind of religious, spiritual, philosophical beliefs off of it. And
Yes.
but he's not very much into Jesus Christ. I mean, he's not much into, he goes into the whole that the Jesus Christ story has been retold in different forms and stuff. And I've always been on the fence with David. Like, I got 5 of his books back here. Doesn't mean I believe everything the man says. I believe he's passionate about what he says. I believe he does a lot of research into what he wants to put in his books. But I can't agree with everything he says either.
Well, it's like me when I said that I wanted to find the truth, and I can't say I'm not going to look at that. In other words, I've got to be able to look at all of it. And I think that's what's hurting him, is that he's not really looking at it, the scientific stuff that goes on from the Bible, and the aspect of the fact that Jesus was here. These are the things that are happening. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of my research has been on the Shroud of Turin, because the Shroud of Turin is definite proof of a resurrection, of a savior, of blood that was divine. I mean, and you can't discredit when you scientifically can prove something.
So you do believe the Shroud of Turin is real?
Oh, yes. And it's going to be told that it's real. I mean, it's been gradually been brought to the forefront. It's just not time for it to be told. There is an agenda. And that's one thing that I could see through all of my research, is that there is a perfect agenda for this. In other words, if it's not quite time for you to know the truth, then we're going to buffer it, make it sound like it's just Da Vinci might have painted it, and then that didn't work for a while. So now we're going to say that the carbon dating was skewed, but then we find out that the carbon dating was done on a piece of cloth that was not the right piece of cloth and was faked and put on there. Was not. Then they knew it was. My research shows they knew it and whatever. And then now, since Pope Francis has come on board, the first thing he did was said, the new research now says that that cloth is from the time period of Jesus Christ. They're having to do that because the more research on it is showing that the blood, the pollen, everything is pointing to that it has to be from that time period, from a man who was crucified, who was a Jewish man, who had on his heels this clay stone residue, who had plants and pollen from that area. I mean, a person could not fake everything that we can scientifically prove is on that shroud right now.
And if the carbon dating had been right, the person faking it would have been only 400 years ago.
Right.
They never put that kind of effort into it. They didn't know about those kind of analysis. You know what I'm saying? So
right. And you can, scientific wise, like I take the blood samples and what's in the blood and the pigments in the blood and the bilirubins in the blood. And then I take the research that Ron White did on what he found to believe was the Ark of the Covenant that was in the grotto that was below where Jesus Christ was actually crucified. And you start looking at the aspects of what is this blood. And then you find out that blood was cloned way back when the research group, the Stirrup research group, went in there and looked at the shroud years ago. And then you realize that Hitler wanted his hands on it. I mean, there is just this aspect that even John Paul the second, I have proof that he actually told the guy that was there in the basilica where it's kept now in Turin, Italy, that he was really looking after a true relic. So he knew it was real. It's not like that it's not real. It's real.
Yeah, I've read that before, that John Paul was, he seriously believed that was the real, didn't care what people were saying, that was really the Shroud of Turin, that was the real deal.
Well, yes, it was. And I heard audio report from the guy that he told that, in Turin. And, this is true information. It's not false information. It's spot on. And everything that I've researched in regard to the shroud, the uniqueness of the shroud, the fact that you cannot, nobody's been able to rebuild it or fake it or do anything with all the technology we have today. It's an amazing cloth, and it is most people don't even realize this. It is the most researched relic in all of human history.
I've always been interested in it. When I remember I first, when I was a kid, and I read all kinds of weird things, and I remember getting into the Shroud of Turin and all the controversy with it. Something with me always felt there's going to be more about it that's going to come out, eventually.
Well, see, the reason that I have a different feeling about this, and I've told this on other radio shows. When I had this dream when I was a child, I saw what I truly believe Jesus looked like. So, my dad was very much a historian. He read everything as far as history. I mean, we had history books. We had all kinds of like encyclopedias and stuff because he was really a historical buff. But I'll never forget him bringing in one day, and I can't remember if it was a Life magazine or if it was a Look magazine, but something like that. And it was a Shroud picture. And that was probably when they were probably doing some of that first research. And he turned it around for me to look at, and he says, "You ever seen a picture that looks like this?" And all of a sudden, it was just like I had cold chill bumps because I'm like, I've seen that man before. I'd seen pictures of people that had theorized what Christ looked like, but that was like looking at what I had seen as a child. So from the time I saw that picture, and I probably was in high school when Dad showed me that, and that would have been in the 1970s. And I know the Stirrup Committee did some stuff in 1968, and then they came back and did something in the 70s. So I feel like it was probably an article on that. And I would give anything if I still had that article. But the fact is, I knew that it was real right then. Nobody would ever have to tell me that's fake. So from the time I saw it, and then when I started researching it as I got older, and then I started hearing people say, well, it's not that. And I'm like, oh, yes, it's real. And somebody is going to finally say it's real. And so we're to the point now that we have got an agenda that's going on, that's going to be a part of the end of days, in which that particular cloth is going to be proved to be real. And when it does, that means all these other religions are going to have to go, whoa. And what is the Pope doing right now but trying to bring all the religions together under one umbrella of understanding? The key factor right now to that umbrella of understanding is Mary. And Mary is involved not only with Fatima, with the Muslims, but with the Roman Catholics. But all the things with Mary are going to come together to help manifest the release of that information. So it's coming down the pike. And it's close to being told, because they can't continue to push it in a corner, because science is literally proving that it's real.
One of the scientific aspects that you kind of cover that I was really interested in, because I've had my experience with this, was the pituitary gland.
Yes.
Now, how is that? You have some research you've done on that, on how that is somehow part of the big manipulation of mankind by the satanic forces, I guess we would call it. So what is that about? Because I had my own with
the pituitary gland is different than what I have studied. And the pituitary gland I'm interested in because it does distribute some of the hormones of the body, and the hormones in the body are actually what control us. But the gland that I have researched so much, and is so much a part of my research in my books, is the pineal gland.
I meant to say pineal.
The third eye in your head.
I said pituitary. I meant pineal. I'm sorry. Mixed them up.
That's okay.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, I was going to ask about it is because I had an experience in my early 20s before I knew anything about pineal glands or pituitary glands or anything like that. But the pineal gland, I had this experience where I had this pressure coming out of the front of my forehead, and a lot of spiritual things happening at this time in my early 20s. It was really weird. And that's when I found out about the third eye and the chakra and stuff like that. I read about them, but didn't really understand them. I didn't know at the time what was happening to me. This pressure was a part of that. That, it wasn't science pressure. It was weird. It was like a spinning wheel in my head. And I had some really weird experiences when that was going on. So I'm interested to know, in the pineal gland, how has that been manipulated in the human race? Is it that serpent gene? Well,
the thing about it is most interesting is that when you try to find research from a scientific standpoint or medical standpoint, it's very difficult to find. And I even went and talked to several medical doctors, looked them in the face and said, explain to me about the pineal gland. And most of them could not tell me hardly anything about it. And I'm like, well, what is the story that the Eastern religions seem to know all about this? And when you do a little research on it and really have to dig for it, you find out that a lizard has a workable third eye. In other words, he sees out of his third eye. It works.
Wow.
So because my undergraduate work and then my master's and then my doctorate was involved in dealing with people and educating people and the psychological aspects of it, especially in my master's, when I began to ask questions about schizophrenia, these people are hearing things. When we started doing things like hypnosis, and being able to see people under hypnosis do things. And I'm like, how are they seeing how to do that? Like write their name in between lines and stuff. And their eyes are closed or they're in rapid eye movement like you are when you're dreaming. Or when we studied sleepwalking and people walk through houses and all kinds of things and never fall over anything, but yet their eyes are closed. Now, I have seen people hypnotized. I have seen people sleepwalk. I have seen these things with my own eyes and know those people's eyes are closed. So they are doing this through something else that is allowing them to see when their eyes are closed.
Joy, I've had that experience.
Pineal gland.
When I was having that pressure in my head, one of the things I had trouble falling asleep, I'd close my eyes. My eyes would be closed, but suddenly be like I could see my whole room.
Yes.
So I've had that experience. I never knew that about maybe I missed that in one of David Icke's books, but I think it's something you might cover. But that reptiles have a third eye.
It's very workable, and they know about that it's workable. And the thing that bothers me is that the Germans were so involved with the psychological aspects of where we've gone from a psychological standpoint of learning things about psychiatry and that kind of thing. I had the opportunity to work with people who were schizophrenic. I got to know them personally. I got to know everything about them. And I would have them say, Joy, I am literally hearing these things. Listen to what I'm telling you. So instead of saying, call the paddy wagon and put these cats and strap them up, I began going, okay, I want you to tell me, what are they telling you? What's going on? What are you hearing? Because I'm thinking, no different than a dog can hear a whistle. A dog whistle, we can blow it all day long, and you and I will be sitting here, we can't hear a thing. And every dog in the neighborhood be running down toward us because they can hear it. The same thing with our eyesight. We can bend light, and you can have something sitting right in front of you, but you can't see it, so you don't know it's there. So again, here I am. I'm not going to put my blinders on and say the person's crazy because they're saying they're hearing voices in their heads. I want to know what's causing you to hear that voice, and what are they telling you? And the more I did the research on it, I'm like, these people are not crazy. They really are hearing something. There's really something audible in their heads that they are hearing. No different than the dog whistle that we can't hear. It's at a different decibel. It's a different whatever. So the more I started studying that and then started looking at the pineal gland, the third eye, that your eyes can be closed and you can walk through a room and not run into anything. You can also hear something that nobody else can hear. The problem was in the spiritual realm that we live in, we were talking about earlier about the ley lines and how that grass goes around our earth. Mm-hmm. When you talk about that, you get an understanding that there's a resonance on the earth. There's a certain resonance that God set up where everything is literally vibrating and singing. So we all have our tunes out there. When the pineal gland is stimulated, and the reason it's stimulated is because I believe it was put there as a holy of holies, and you're not to do that. So when you decide you want to do that and you sit in this cobra position, and remember, it's a cobra position. That means it's a snake position.
I knew you were going to say
you need to get it together, because what you're doing is that you're fixing to raise the serpent up your spine into your holy of holies. And when you do that, people who do that, they will do things like meditate, and they will do things like and do this little. What they're doing is they're bringing that up and they're putting it into the Holy of Holies, and that gland will start spinning, and it almost looks like it's a flickering tongue. Well, the more I started looking at this, what do the pharaohs have? They have this huge thing goes around their head, and right here, they've got that thing with that flickering tongue serpent. So, here they are wearing something that was actually making that even more accessible to be able to communicate. And then I started looking at, well, that's very interesting, because they call it the all-seeing eye, and we look at the pyramids and whatever, it's like a beehive. And then I started studying about, what is it about the queen bee and how does she control her workers and whatever. And you find out it's through this humming noise that this is being sent out. It's a vibration thing that she's communicating with those people. When she dies, those worker bees go nuts. They don't know what to do because they're not getting their little beeping noise to know anything that's happening. So then I'm like, oh, here. Then if we look back and we cross-section the brain on either side will look like the cherub wings, and the pineal gland sitting right in the center of the forehead, it looks just like the Holy of Holies.
It's all Ark of the Covenant.
So yeah. So what did Christ tell us? That our bodies are a temple. Exactly. And if our body is a temple, and the temple had its Holy of Holies, then God, when he created us, he put within us a way to communicate with us. Well, it's interesting enough. The more I studied that pineal gland, it has a quartz in it, just like a transistor radio. So it can send and it can receive electromagnetic waves. It's no different than the queen bee to the worker bees and back. So when you start studying how was these Eastern religions controlling people, and the Illuminati controls people, and how do they indoctrinate their so-called members, they use it by affecting the pineal gland. They're manipulating them through repetitious stuff, and the Bible tells us not to do that repetitious stuff, because that's like the shamans would do the music to a certain beat, and then you work that up into a frenzy, and when you do that, that pineal gland's spinning, and you're open. And that pineal gland is open. Once it gets open, then anything in the spiritual realm comes in. There's where you get demonic possession, or you get oppression if you're in a Christian. And it's real.
Joy,
the Bible tells us it's real.
Before that ever happened to me, before that happened with my pineal gland, I was attacked by something. I being a Gnostic, the way I am, I don't like to classify it as demonic. I'm analytical, and that's I call it a dark entity. It's just my way how I deal with it. But it was after that happened to me. A couple of years after that I had the pineal gland thing, and I've always had this thing where, when it did happen, you talk about extra sense with it or whatever. Where I've held a picture of a dead person. I wasn't trying, so I wasn't trying. Somebody gave me this picture because it was a photo album left at their house. I was holding a picture of somebody who was dead. I suddenly out of my mouth, I said their name, and then I said their last name without even knowing. And I'm one of those people, I don't dwell down the path of trying to be a psychic or anything like that, or a medium, because I think it's not something I want. But I have friends that are and have this ability. What you're saying is that to use that pineal gland is bad, to have that extra sense. Is that what you're getting to? That you shouldn't be trying to do any of that or have anything.
You really shouldn't have anything to do with it. And the Bible really warns you about that, because it says you fight against things, spirits and things in high places, and that you don't have the capability to deal with it because you're not set up to deal with the spiritual in the physical realm. If you have this happen to you, then you're dealing with an entity that has much more power over you. And we see that in the Bible when Jesus, one of the first things he did as far as his miracles, he comes up on a person and they've got demonic possession. And he talks to the demons, and the demons talk to him. And then they run into he puts them in the swine, they run into the water and whatever. So the fact is, the Bible tells us, first of all, they're here, they're demonic. And that they're up to no good, and they cause a lot of problems. And it tells us why it's causing us the problems. See, if you look back, and if you go back to the Garden of Eden, when God blew the breath of life into Adam, that spirit was a pure spirit into a pure body of what was human. When you create something that's mixed, let's say with the serpent, or the beast serpent, with Eve, what she created would have a spirit within it that was not the true spirit of what God had created. So the Bible tells us whatever spirit God gives goes back for him for judgment. The spirit that was not created and was a mixed thing ended up staying on the earth. And in my book, Eden, The Knowledge of Good and Evil, I talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh, because it tells us, a Sumerian text tells us, and of course the Sumerian text now is not a biblical text.
No,
it's a text that I truly believe, and it exists, and it's real. It's a part of what the Canaanites and that lineage of serpents wrote about. This giant who was Gilgamesh, you know, he was looking for the ability to have eternal life, and he knew he couldn't. And if he didn't find a way to keep his flesh alive, then his spirit would walk the earth. So all the demonic spirits that exist here on this earth have been leftovers from these beings that were before the flood and then thereafter, because they can't be returned back to the Father. It's a terrible thing. So that's why they were put like in Hades or Sheol, whatever the Bible, you know, uses for hell, until the final days in which, you know, all these things will be judged. But they do walk among us. And even we know that the Bible, where you were able to speak these names, yes, you can channel. It doesn't say that you can't channel. The Bible talks about the witch of Endor. Right. She's sitting on an oracle site, and the oracle sites are always on those dragon nodes, and they always have water under them. And all your megalithic buildings all over the world are placed on those dragon nodes with water chambers. In fact, all your Gothic cathedrals were done the same way, that were built by the Knights Templar, which is a whole nother show we could get into. But the deal was that that you can use telluric energy from the earth to actually channel. And so when these witches of Endor or these mediums would go and sit on these oracle sites, yes, what they were channeling was information. The problem is this information from the dark side. And Daniel explains this to us, that there is the holy ones and there are the watchers. And the book of Enoch tells us the same thing. The watchers are the fallen angels. They watch us continually, how they can make us fall on our face, how they can find the right thing to hurt us, you know, how they can use our own thought processes against us. You know, they're watching us. And some people get really nervous when I say, yeah, there's a paranormal world and it's watching you. It's watching you 24/7. When you close your eyes and you lay down in bed at night, it's watching you. When you get up, whatever you do, it's watching you. And then you've got the holy ones, who were the holy angels, but they were real. They're real. All the stuff is real. And so when you talk about that, if the pineal gland is open, then it's open to that spiritual realm of evil spirits that can't go back to the Father. So they are looking for willing subjects to allow them to come in. And so, you know, I've watched exorcisms, and I've read about exorcisms, and I really like the work that Malachi Martin did.
Oh, I love Malachi.
The Hostage to the Devil is a book that I wouldn't recommend for everybody that's got, you know, you need to have a stomach to understand that, and you need to be really grounded in faith if you're going to try to read his work. Because what it does is it introduces you to these things, that they are real. And that if you're not prepared for them, whether you be Christian, whether you be a priest, if you go in to be a part of that, you can be overcome by this entity. And it's a real entity, because Jesus Christ talked to it. You know, and it was here. And the thing about it is, when Christ was here, you know, Satan took him up into the mountains and he said, hey, you know, look across these kingdoms. I'll give you these kingdoms. All you got to do is bow down and worship me. And what did Christ tell him? You know, you're not to tempt. But the thing about it is, when Christ was before Pilate, he specifically told Pilate, you know, my kingdom is not of this world. So you understand that who's running the show, who's over these kingdoms, is an evil force. So if you open the pineal gland up, and it's your holy of holies, if that is your holy of holies in there, and I'm going to tell you scientifically, a cross section looks just like the holy of holies. And if Christ said our body is our temple, and you better keep your temple in one eye, and that one eye had better be on good, that when you allow it to become a party line, Satan's going to come in on you as you're open to him. And then you can't deal with it unless someone helps you if you become possessed. Now, if you don't become possessed, you may be used by the spiritual world to manipulate other people, to do other things. And that's the danger. It's kind of like a friend of mine and I were talking about the Harry Potter series. Well, Harry Potter series, yeah, it's an okay read. But when you find out that it was a channeled book from masters, so it was written in a remote writing situation, which is you can do, just like you can channel and just like you can talk in the mediumship. When you find out it was done like that, it is to start people to get numbed down to it so that you want to participate in it. The astral flight is real. The proof of life after death, where people have near-death experiences and they leave their body. I've had case studies of this. I've seen these kinds of things. The body, you still look like yourself, but your body's laying down there and in this tremendous pain that you cannot feel. But yet you know you are real, and that's real too. So all these things, while they're on the aspect of paranormal and New Age stuff, the Bible is also telling us these things. So what I've always said is the Bible is the most paranormal book that's ever been written.
True.
Because you got people walking on water. You've got frogs falling out of the sky. You've got manna falling out of the sky. You've got people seeing ghosts. You've got people being raised from the dead. I mean, there is not another book out there that is as paranormal as the Bible.
Oh, I definitely can't disagree with that. I mean, that's why I was fascinated with the Bible. I grew up in a household where my mom basically gave me an open door to discover for myself. My mom's Buddhist, more philosophical than anything, but for me, she encouraged me to read the Bible. She encouraged me to read anything, really, honestly. But I read the Bible a number of times. I'm not a person who could quote the Bible at all. But I always found it fascinating. Every aspect of it, to me, it's like there's something, these are words. I know for a Christian, they take the words to be a meaning and structure to life. But to me, there's something there, something that marked mankind a long time ago. And we're still trying to understand it. Like, I think they're trying to describe things that they could not understand at the time too.
Well, I think the thing about the Bible that people don't stop and think about, and which science has proven, is that you can take a scripture, you can take a chapter, you can take a word, you can break that word down into its individual Hebraic letters, and those letters will actually mean something. So the Bible can be on a surface level when you read it, but the more you study it and you get down into it, it gets broader and broader and broader, which means that no human mind, computer, whatever, could have ever written the scriptures like they are. I think one of the most fascinating things that I've ever seen is the equidistant letter sequencing, the Bible code, in which you find names and dates and places of all these people that are there, that were born, they died on these dates or whatever. You could not have planned that. So there's no computer system that could have ever written that stuff out. We're talking about typical men who said they were, given this by God. There is no other way but that. And that's when the more you look at it from a scientific standpoint. And that's one reason that even my publisher laughed when I said, my book needs to be under the science and the religion. They said, oh my goodness, Joy, we've never had a book under science and religion because they've always been so separated. And I'm like, the reason they've been separated is that now I'm going to show you that they're one and the same. And so when a person gets into any Buddhist or Hindu or whatever they want to study, African shamanism, whatever, come back and look at it all. Look at every bit of the pieces you can find. And what happens is once you start doing that, then you start seeing the bigger picture and how magnificent it is, so that you know that no human mind could have done this, that something else is totally in control of this, and that you and I are not just grains of sand, that every one of us has within us a spirit, and it is a part of our temple, and it exists, and it can communicate with the Father. I think the biggest thing is that, I brought this up on many shows too, so people who are listening, they've heard it. God is a great conductor. And now that we're able to prove that our DNA, each one of our DNA, your DNA, my DNA, whoever's DNA, is all different, but yet it's singing. So that means, like a huge conductor leading a band, if that string up here on the third violin breaks, the conductor knows it just like that. He's got that kind of ear. God knows it too. So when you start doing something different or being manipulated, he's aware of it. And the thing that's most interesting to me when I did hypnosis, and people were aware that when you do hypnosis, that you can take somebody back and they can sit there and say they're in the first grade, and they can tell you what Johnny had on in front of them, the color shoes, what his voice sounded like, and they're talking like they're in the first grade. And then you give them a pencil, and they take and write like we did when we were in the first grade, like we had those huge big pencils, and they'll take with their eyes closed and write like a first grader. And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to take you on up to when you were in the 7th grade or 8th grade, and their eyes are still closed and their voice changes. And then they can they'll turn their paper sideways in a little bitty line with their eyes closed, and they will write their cursive name within those lines. Those kinds of things tell me that everything that we think, do, or say is in our brain.
It's all there, pre-recorded.
It's every bit there. And, you know, some of the, there was a show on the other night that was quite interesting about superhuman capability, where people can remember names and places and dates. But there is several celebrities that I know of that can remember every day of their life what they did. I worked with handicapped people for years. I had one young man that literally could say, like, I'm a mama's baby, and he could play the piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. Okay, that's telling you that our brain has so much more capability than we could ever imagine, because we're not using it all.
Look, there was just a post recently about an autistic artist. You know, they flew him over New York for like 10 minutes. He got to see the New York, city, and right away came back and drew it T for T. Like,
yes.
Exactly. You know, the capabilities of the human brain, to me, we can look under the sea, we can look into space for, knowledge in that, but we still haven't even looked in our own brains yet, in my opinion, for the capacity, the miracle that, I'm not sure
it's us
race, but it's something crazy what the brain can do. I can't remember one day it's like that, but it's there, it's potential, it's somewhere in my subconscious.
It is all there, and every one of us have that capability. And I think that is the reason that one day, when all this is said and done, when we get to the Battle of Armageddon, when we get to the judgment day, when we live forever, when time stands still, and I say this in my work, that in pure light, time stands still. So total pureness means forever. If we get to that point with our brains being like that, then people will say, well, I don't understand. Well, I won't be happy. Listen, with your brain, with your capability of that, the sky's the limit. It's unbelievable what the human mind would be able to do. And, we don't stop and think how precious it is that God gave us life, and he gave us a spiritual thing that lives within us that can live forever, that we won't just fall over and that's it. And, I proved this scientifically from the law of thermodynamics. Anything that's energy's made, you can't destroy it. You might blow it up, you might blow it in a million pieces, but it can still be brought back together. And the Bible tells us in the Valley of Dry Bones, you can bring all that stuff together. Looking at the cloning, and I go into all the aspects of cloning. Cloning is just one little cell on us, but in that cell is a holographic you.
All your memories.
So it might look like one little piece of cell, but it's got the whole you in it.
Now, do you believe it would, if somebody was cloned? I've always wondered this. Would they have a capacity to reach into those memories?
The capacity to reach into the memory in the brain is a learned process. It's a learned process. So what would happen is that they could be, for example, let's just say you wanted to clone yourself and you wanted to live, in case you got any kind of problem and died, you could download your thoughts and your history and whatever, and then relearn that information as a child and coming back. And now that they've got the capability to tap directly into the brain like a computer, you could learn it in no time. You have those memories.
They just recently came out of state that they're able to tell words that you're thinking about in your brain. They just recently did the study where they could, certain words are said that, in Japan, it was doing it. They thought a certain word, it would appear in a certain part, the whatever they're looking at in the brain, so they could actually tell what word somebody was thinking about. And that's taking the brain.
Well, that's right. And the more that we have found the capability to be able to do that, the more, cloning has looked so good to people because it could be an aspect of eternal life, that you could continue to live and to live and to live. And the death gene is what they're looking for, because the death gene is the God particle. I mean, that's exactly what CERN is looking for, is the God particle. I explain that in my books as well, because Einstein was the first one to say that you can never find the unified field theory of what he would say, that everything's connected, that there's one aspect holding it together, and if you ever find that aspect, you can control everything. That's what the whole aspect of all of this alchemical studies, black magic, has been since time began. It was what the Gilgamesh epic is all about. It's what Gilgamesh wanted. He wanted eternal life so that he would never be judged. We want to stay away from judgment, and Cain's lineage knows there's coming a judgment.
And Harry Potter, Philosopher's Stone. That's what he was.
Yes, it's the same stuff. It's all a part of that, and I tie all of that together. I mentioned about the Philosopher's Stone. I talk about alchemy. I talk about how the black magic has been brought into the picture. All that aspect, along with why we have the Madonna and Giles in Isis and Horus and Osiris, and how that goes back and ties in to Nimrod and his mother, and why there was this thing that the child was, from a divine, came from a divine being going with a human person. Again, we go back to where did it start at? It started in the Garden of Eden, and that's what happened when the serpent went with Eve. We're talking a divine being who went with a human who produced something that was not what God wanted. That was outside of the realm. In fact, everything in the Garden of Eden was supposed to be after its kind. Every tree had its own fruit. Every cow went with a cow, bird with a bird, those kinds of things. They're wanting this mixing of stuff around. Only when the serpent got involved did we see mixing. And what did it say about his tree? God said he was a mixture of tree of good and evil. And that's the best way that Satan works. He takes a little bit of good to get you kind of going along with it, and then he pushes his evil on you. It's the same thing with Harry Potter. You think it's a good little story, what's it going to hurt? But the more you participate in it, the more you become open to, let's do a seance, let's do this, and then the possession can start. It's no different than taking a drink of liquor or using drugs. It might not hurt you the first time, but then the more you do it, the more it takes a hold, until it can ultimately destroy you. Food the same way, sex the same way. I mean, it's those are the sins, and that's how Satan gets a hold of people.
I'll admit, I'm a big fan of the Harry Potter books. I have them on the bookshelf over there.
Well, I've read the Harry Potter series. I've watched the movies, and I watch them because I have to do the research on this stuff. I have to see, like, for example, when I sit down and I even watch like the Super Bowl half times, when I watch the Olympic Games, I talk about, the symbology that's used in those games there, and it's being done to use subliminal training to your mind. You might think it's not affecting you, but black magic, and that's magic with a M-A-C-I-K.
Yeah.
Black magic is alchemical black magic. It's the theory of doubleness. On my website, www.drjoye.com, drjoye.com, I show how Da Vinci actually does his paintings. And the way he does his paintings is that, yes, you would walk up and say, oh, he did a beautiful painting of the Last Supper. There's Christ, and there's all the symbols in there that seem a little bit strange, but you have, Christian people who really like that painting. Well, when you start mixing it and bringing it together and double-minding it and using mirrors, because he used mirrors to paint like that, and he put his evil symbols in there, when you're standing there looking at it, you're going, oh, pretty painting, beautiful painting, great architectural work and everything else artistic-wise. But what's looking back at you are evil symbols that you can't see, that your mind's eye, your third eye, is picking up on. And it's real.
I know Da Vinci they said they thought he had ties to some secret societies back.
Oh, he did. Major.
So you really think Da Vinci was putting in symbolism that was to manipulate humanity?
Oh, exactly. Because all the symbols that we've been able to uncover are not like pretty little symbols of like hearts and flowers.
No.
There's some of the evilest looking, and I invite you to go to the website. There's some of the evilest looking things that we have found in his work that actually will make your skin crawl. In fact, the first couple of ones that I found, I couldn't close my eyes one night because every time I close my eyes, I could see those symbols. They are there for that purpose. And the bad thing is, when you look at the Mona Lisa or any other paintings that he's done, along with anybody that painted like him, because there's many of those people who painted like him that were, you know, during that period of what they call enlightenment, they were using that kind of stuff and manipulating the mind with it. It's been going on a long, long, long time. And that's how you finally manipulate society, to the point that then you numb them down so much that then you can corral them together, and then you put an Antichrist over them, and they're like the queen bee. You know, they're all listening to the queen bee and never asking any questions. They're just going along with it because they think that's the only way they can be saved.
So there's a lot of places I could go with you, like a lot of rabbit holes here as we talk about. But there's a couple things I want to touch, and I want to bring this up to the audience too. If you have any questions while we're talking this last half hour, feel free to comment. I'll let you ask a question. The Skype channel or Skype line is OOJBland. So JBLAND. Just send me a contact request if you haven't called in before, and I'll accept it and bring you in. If you're a troll that was in my chat room, if you call in, I'll just hang up on your waist. Don't waste your time. All right. While we wait and see if we get any phone calls in, I want to ask you, so what is Armageddon? What do you think? I mean, do you have any kind of, I mean, nobody knows when the end of the days are going to come. I'm not asking you when it's going to come, but what do you think?
You know, I'll tell you that in my book, I do explain that how you'll know it's the end of days, because it's based on the thief in the night, which was a Hebraic practice of watching for the lunar changes and on their lunar calendars. They knew that when the final quarter of the moon was, then they would go to the wall and they would watch for the new moon. Of course, in the lunar calendar for the new moon was not like what we say the new moon when we see that there's no moon out there. It was the first little 7% that you see that's like a little crest. And the moment that showed up, they blew their trumpets and they all went to the temple. And if you didn't get into those doors within a certain time, you were to drop everything and run. And if you didn't get in there, you got closed up, and that was it. And so the catching away would occur. It tells us in Scripture that we will know not the day or the hour. No, just like that particular thing that happened every month with the lunar calendar and them going to the temple for that particular Sabbath.
Right.
We'll know when the time gets close, because we'll know the season. We are to be watching for that season, because any time during that day or hour, it can occur. Well, what does it tell us about when is that going to happen? Well, the Bible tells us very clearly that when we start seeing earthquakes in different places, we see tornadoes, we see these things happening with birds and fish and dying, and changes in the sun, moon, and stars, and we start seeing somebody that looks like an Antichrist, and we start seeing that people turn on their families, father against son, son against mother, you know, when there's total unrest for humanity, when there becomes a time when flesh could not continue if he does not come back, and you start seeing biotechnology and transhumanism and cloning start happening. Okay, so let's look at that. How many times has that happened in history so far? It hasn't. We might have a tornado, we might have an earthquake, but the Bible says when they start becoming like a woman in travail, which you're about to find out is what that's all about, when she gets close to the day that she's going to have that baby,
Right.
it's going, those pains that she had, like maybe one here and one there, they're going to get closer and closer, and they're going to get harder and harder and harder until that baby's born. Well, you don't know exactly the day or the hour unless you did a cesarean section. But if you just let it be natural, you're going to know that the water broke. And when that water breaks, you're going to know that this is fixing to happen. That's the same way that we're going to see the end of days happening. So right now, we're in a time period that all these things are happening exactly like the Bible says. I mean, to the T. From everything changing in the sun, moon, and stars. I mean, things are happening on Mars, Uranus, Saturn, the changes on the sun. I mean, all this is happening universe-wise. It's happening with all the fish dying, the birds dying. People are dying of strange things. I mean, all the stuff, unrest, the Middle East, the fact that I believe that we've got the Pope where he's at, the false prophet, the Peter the Roman, Francis, the fact that I believe that the Antichrist is here, that he's in the cloned image of Jesus Christ, because John the Revelator says it's going to be an iconic image. The fact that that's been done, we've got the people in place, we've got the red dragon, everything is right in place, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
I got to ask you on this one. So do you believe they've they cloned Jesus Christ for the
Oh, yes.
Antichrist.
Yes.
And he's alive now.
Yes.
So would he be like a public figure right now, or are
Yeah.
they going to
Yes.
that
Yes.
he was a public figure right now?
And he has to come through the lineage, the Assyrian lineage. He has to meet all the criteria that the Bible says in regard to the Assyrian that will come. And it has to be from the tribe of Dan. It has to be connections to that in a pedigree. Okay? But the problem is that the Bible says that to be able to step into the temple and proclaim himself God, he has to be a prophet, priest, and king. Well, the only person that he'd ever be able to say that he's a prophet, priest, and king is Jesus himself. There's no other possibility. The other thing is when Jesus was going to the cross, he told the Pharisees and Sadducees, I'm going to raise that temple back up in 3 days. And they laughed at him because they thought he was talking about building their temple that took 40 some odd years to build. They said, you know, it took us all these years to build it. How are you going to put it back up there in 3 days? He was talking about his body. And he specifically warned us himself that there will come at the end of days people pretending to be him. And Thessalonians says that this Antichrist is going to stand in the temple of God, the flesh of God, the temple of God, proclaiming that he is God. The only way he can do that, and the Pope's getting ready to tell you that shroud is real. The blood on that shroud was cloned a long time ago, and they've been playing with it to get it to the right lineage that has the capability to stand in Jerusalem and say they can be king of Jerusalem. And there's only one royal lineage that can do that.
You're going to say,
and that's the lineage that comes from the Davidic lineage. And who has the Davidic lineage posted everywhere that they come straight from King David, but the royal family of Britain.
Royal family. Yeah, definitely knew.
So I mean, like the pedigree's there, the money's there, the connection is there. You know, when you just got all the pieces of the puzzle again, and you don't look at it going, oh, conspiracy, oh, it can't be like that. When you look at the scientific, these things have already been done. Yeah. You know, it's proof of the pudding. It's not like you're just throwing it out there and saying this is the way it is. My research is based on scientific fact. It's not like I'm making it up. I don't want to fool myself, because if I'm fooling myself, then I'm just fooling myself stupid. I don't want to do that. When I would sit down to research or do something, I want to know that what I am telling you is no different than I'd be telling myself. And I don't want to fool myself, because I truly do believe that this spirit lives within us, and we've got to answer for it. You can't say, oh, I didn't know, because we do know. We all have got a conscience.
It reminds me of a book I read a long time ago called The Antichrist in a Cup of Tea.
Yes. In fact, you know, he really speculated back in the day. In fact, his book came out when my first book, Antichrist, Calling Him As Your Jesus, came out about the same time. I think it might have been his might have been after mine, but it was somewhere about the same time, because after mine came out, I was at a bookstore signing my book, and somebody asked me about had I read that book, and I said no. And they brought me that book, and I was quite amazed, because I saw that he had found the lineage that I was saying was going to bring the Antichrist, and I was already looking at how I could age Prince William. And I was already getting some artists to help me draw up what he would look like as an older person. But at the same time, the coats and of their, you know, they all have their coats of armor and how they say their lineages have come. And I thought that Tim Cohen did an excellent job of showing how the lineages have come, and how Britain has the capability of stepping into the limelight in these final days. And like I say, he just thought it was going to be Charles. I do believe Charles is the Red Dragon, but his son is the one that looks just like the Shroud of Turin. And the fact that Diana specifically said she was a birthing chamber. And the thing about it is, he married her to have William, but he, you know, once he had that set up, Diana told everybody he was in love with Camilla the whole time. Why didn't he marry Camilla all the time? Because Camilla could not do what Diana did. Diana's lineage, the Stuart lineage, had to be in place so that they could bring Charles's lineage on paper to make William have the capability to step in and say prophet, priest, and king, but at the same time be able to use this other aspect, because when that doesn't work, they have proof to the false prophet that he is who he says he is. I am God standing in the temple of God.
So you think Prince William is the possible?
Oh, he looks like him. He's the same size. I mean, you can go to my website, Dr. Joye, that's drjoye.com, and look at it. And, you know, and we've done analysis of him as he's gotten older, the eyebrows, the nose, the way the nose is set, the chin matches to the T. The thing about it is, so does everything else about him match about what we're being told the Antichrist is going to do. And he's just waiting in the wings to take that step. I mean, you know, we could do a whole show on doing nothing but let's just identify all the things about him that meet the qualifications of being the Antichrist. Well, there are just so many. And my third book, a Beguiled series, is really a lot about that.
Well, what I found when I read the Antichrist, A Cup of Tea, is that even if he isn't the Antichrist, something's really wrong, because they've gone a long way through that family's history to represent certain symbols in their family that lead back.
Exactly. That's right.
And the Merovingian.
Yes.
And stuff.
Yes, it's all been, you know, when you go back and look at the Merovingian bloodline was supposed to have started between a divine being and a human. Of course, we go back to the Garden of Eden. That's exactly what happened, how it's been brought forward. The fact that, you know, the night that that Diana said her and Charles, after they got married, he's sitting over there reading books about, you know, how to do these crazy things. And you're like, well, what would he be reading all these paranormal kinds of books? You know, what was he getting into? The black arts. And then the fact that she tries to kill, when she finds out she's pregnant, she tries to kill herself with William, knowing that he would be the next king. I mean, literally, she throws herself down flights of stairs. She does everything trying to kill her and the baby, which doesn't make sense.
Sounds like a script to Omen.
Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, or Rosemary's Baby, you know.
Yeah.
My question to you two is this, though. You know, I hate to get back to David Icke on this, but we touch about a lot of the similar themes. Do you go down the line that they are shape-shifting reptilians?
Well, they are reptilians because Diana said so. She said they were lizards. She literally, you know, on camera said they were lizards. Most people thought she was just being ugly, but when you know the truth, that there's a lineage of terrors, like I mentioned before, coming all the way from the Garden of Eden. I have it traced all the way right down to those British people. They have that in them that is a third workable eye. They are lizards. And the fact that they have to drink blood, the fact that they've always been known to be kind of cannibals and vampires, and why they're connected to vampires and all that. I mean, it's historical proof. I'm not just bringing that up and just saying it. In my books, I show you how historically it's been followed through the ages, how they ate pieces of mummies, how they drank blood, how all this stuff is connected with those kinds of people who are serpent royal lineages. And you know, we know that there was the 12 lineages that God said were, you know, the Israelites. But as far as that is concerned, there's also, according to, you know, the research that's been done, 13 lineages of evil. And the most evil one is the Merovingian, because the Merovingian is the serpent bloodline. It is the royal bloodline that really has manifested itself to rule the world, to really rule the world. And it does. It's the wealthiest. It owns the most land. And I will always say that the British Empire is never gone away. It's the Holy Roman Empire. The British Empire is much bigger, and they control all this stuff. And I try to show all this in my book. There is just so much in my work that we could never get through it, you know, in 2 hours. But all this, I have all this stuff in there, and I have indexes. I have my bibliography that you can go back. I quote people that you can go to their books and find this stuff, so that you can get a really broader picture that this stuff is really real. It's not some made up fantasy. It's not like I'm just writing to be writing. It is true stuff, and it's happening, and we are part of it, and we're going to witness. I truly believe we will see Armageddon. that we are the last generation. We're going to see that happen.
Well, I hope you're wrong. I really do.
Most people do. They don't want to think about it. But I honestly say, with the process of knowing what prophecy is, and prophecy so far has been 100%. So if it says it's like a woman in travail, like she's going to in her birth pains, and it's coming to pass, we're seeing the tornadoes getting worse. We're seeing the hurricanes getting worse. We're seeing all these things getting worse and worse and worse. And they're closer and closer and closer together. So like the Hebrews who were watching for the new moon to blow the trumpets to go to the temple, the catching away is not that far away because of that.
Oh, I hope you're wrong.
Well, the thing about it is, the thing I would just say is that if you're not sure about, you need to spend time, make time for yourself to decide if you have to meet your maker. Have you done everything that you wanted to do the way you wanted to do it, and you have not been manipulated by this world? Because the world is here to manipulate us, and we fall victim to it. I do it all the time. Then I have to ask for forgiveness because it's human nature to fall victim to it. But as long as you're aware that the choices that you make are being recorded, can be brought up, will be brought up to you by the maker who has your tune to your DNA, to your pineal gland, the connection, you're going to have to answer for it, because we are made in his image, and there is a judgment day. He wants to take us back to the garden. He wants to take us back to paradise, but he's not going to take those that don't want to go there, because he doesn't want to deal with Satan, because everything that Satan's doing, he already knows. He's already found out what's going to happen to him. He knows that his jig is up, and he's try to take everybody he can to just destroy them. But again, you're not going to be like lights out. When the judgment happens, you're going to either go into this paradise of pure light, or you're going to go into a lake of burning fire. Well, some people say, well, okay, when it's over with. No, it's not. Because again, energy made, you can reform it and reburn it, reform it and reburn it. You could continue to burn forever, just like you could continue to live in pure light forever with pureness, and there would be no sin, so you would be in pure light. So those things are scientific. It's not like I'm telling you something that's, hokey pokey or whatever. It's the truth, and it's a choice that we all have to make. Do we want to spend, a life on earth and do our own thing and party and whatever, or do we want to think about, if we do that what is that going to mean for eons of time? Is it going to be forever? I'm sorry, I lost my little microphone. Right. Is it going to be for eons of time? Is it going to be forever? It's a choice, and then you can't blame anybody. When you stand before this creator, and I will honestly say, just knowing how the pineal gland works, and knowing what it looks like, and knowing what the Bible says about it, and knowing that it does do all these things, even with the paranormal, it is real. It's not fake. It's really real. So something is to all this. And the fact that we've got cell towers out there and satellites being set up in place that can biologically control that pineal gland, there'll come a day, and the Bible tells us that you'll have 144,000 that have to be sealed in their forehead. Because if they're not sealed in their forehead, they become Manchurian candidates with no ability biologically to affect themselves.
That's always been the scariest thing to me about the whole scenario. And for a lot of people might watch, and this is like my first episode I've ever had somebody on, we really got deep and down into the Bible and a Christian perspective of this. So for some of my viewers, they're a little taken back by some of this information,
Well, and I know that I know you will, because I myself had to deal with it. It's not like something you want to hear. It doesn't make you like happy to hear it sometimes, but if I don't tell you, if I say don't worry about it, then I've lied to you, because it is something we all are going to have to deal with. There's no way around it. We can't find that perfect thing, that gene that we can live to get up forever. We still got that spirit within us. It's going to be judged. It's really, really real. And paranormal people should know, because you experience with astral travel, with mediumship, with seances. It's real. Christians are the ones that usually don't want to believe it. They get really anxious when they find out someone's watching them 24/7. I'm like, Okay, but the Bible tells you that you're being watched. Everything that you think, do, or say is being recorded. And it's, we're electrical systems. Our whole body is electrical. The fact that you can clone, what you do is you take an egg and you clean it out of the DNA out of a woman, and you take a cell like of you and poke it in there and put it in the woman. You electrify it to make it start growing. So you're an electrical entity. You are energy in the very beginning. And the Bible tells us that God knew David when he was in the womb. It's just a golem. So, when people have abortions, that's a problem. Apparently there's already something there. So you all these things, if I don't tell the truth about it, then I'm not being truthful as a researcher. I'm not a prophet. I'm a researcher. And these are truths that I truly believe are real and that we're going to have to answer for.
Joy, like I said, this is like I was saying, is some of this, I knew this episode would take some of my listeners back a little bit. They're like, wow, we're getting a lot of touchy subject. And I think somebody posted that. It's like, wow, this can get kind of touchy because, when you get into religion, when you get into these ideas, when you break it down to brass tacks and talk about it, one, you talk about keeping the bloodline pure. Well, some people can take that as being racist. I know.
Oh, well, no. And I explained that, because there's always been that thing about that Cain's lineage became the black people. No, the Cain's lineage became the royal serpent lineage. And your royal serpents can be black, white, pink, or purple. They're all different. In other words, they're all different racial connections. But the pure races, as far as race is concerned, were created by God. So there is nothing saying that certain, races are satanic or whatever.
But you see how hard your job is as a researcher is to talk about these things, because where people can go with it.
Yes.
It's so complicated. You can't fit it all into 2 hours for one.
Well, I hope that you'll have me back on as a guest again, Jason. And once you have your baby and everything situated, and let me come back on and we can talk more about that, because I think it really is important for you to understand that 90% of the people or the human beings on this planet are God's people, and the people that are the tares, they're the royal lineages. Then you get a real different perspective that they're trying to play us against each other.
That's what I wanted to get to. See, that's and for people that don't know, what she talks about tares is the wheat and tares parable from Jesus, right?
Yes, that's right.
Who he's going to harvest, that, he tells them they can't, like I said, I don't quote scripture, but when he's going to, they throw the seeds down, if I get this right, and the wheat's going to grow, and the tares or the weeds are going to grow. Right. Together, and they want to take out all the wheat right away. He says, no, we have to let them grow, or you'll take out all the roots. You'll take out the wheat.
That's right.
So you're really deep down look at that is that this whole waiting for Armageddon is a way for us to separate ourselves from that, from the tares, from the weeds.
That's right. And being able to do that requires going to the harvest. And I was a little, country girl, I told you earlier. We would go out and try to pull weeds up out of peanuts. If you pull those weeds up, if they got so big, you'd uproot the peanuts with it. So the thing about it, the wheat and the tares, the wheat and the tares look like each other until it's time for the harvest. And then the harvest is done in such a way that God can separate them where you and I could not. That's why it has to go from the time it's planted, the seeds have been planted in the Garden of Eden, all the way up to the Armageddon time. And it's very important that people understand it is not a racial thing at all, but it is a thing between a royal serpent lineage and humanity.
Yeah, and for people to also know, one of the reasons I brought her on this show is a lot of the things that you've said, Joy, is things that I've, and I don't, like I said, I don't agree with everything you said, but it's not even that I can say that I don't agree. I'm still in question, you could say.
Sure. Well, I hope what I've made you do is think about it so that you'll go do your research, because if I have done that as an educator, then I've taught you to educate yourself.
You hit upon a lot of things over the last, I have to say, when I seriously got into reading and a lot of this stuff, I mean, I've always been interested since I was a little kid. I was a weird kid. But more in the last 20 years, I did a lot of reading on this, since high school. I mean, I've been really, even grade school, I started reading into, reading the Bible. I was obsessed with Indiana Jones, archaeology and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But a lot of the things you said, as over the years of reading the symbolism, the bloodlines, this is all stuff I've discovered too. And I want to tell my audience, you might not totally get into what she's saying or understand what she's saying, but do the research. Look
That's
into.
right.
She might not. You might not be right. I might not be right. But you can look for yourself and make your own assumptions. But there's something there. It's not as what she's saying. There's a lot of reality to this. As scary as it is.
I think it's scary. I think sometimes it's so scary. And a lot of people will say, well, I want to read your book. And I'm like, just don't read it before you start to go to bed at night. It's not a bedtime story. It's not meant to make you feel warm and fuzzy. It's meant to it's to challenge you to find the truth.
Yeah. Well, and then and thank you for coming on tonight, because I really love your approach, that you don't accept things at face value, that you really dig it deep into it. And you've done a lot of research. You've done a lot of research on this stuff. You're way beyond me. I do it at a casual reading, but you hit upon a lot of things I've known, and not just from David Icke books, stuff on my own reading over the years, that you really hit upon a lot of stuff that I've kind of thought about and discovered, and especially when it comes down to the meaning of the Bible. And I'd love to have you on again. One of the things we didn't even get into tonight, we won't now, but one of the things I'd love to have you get on again is your aspect on UFOs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I'd love to have you on again on another night from your perspective about UFOs and how that all plays into this. So I could make
sure.
Your show.
We could do a whole show on that. We can do a whole show. I mean, every aspect of my research. I could do shows on every, aspect of the fields of study that I've incorporated into this work, because they all have a connection to one another.
It's all a soup.
Yes, it is. It really is.
Paranormal soup, because I swear all these scenes in some way tie together.
They do.
And one big unified theory of paranormal.
That's right. And it's important that we try to look at it from a standpoint of us being human, because the more we are willing to do that, the more we can learn from each other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Joy. Next week, I'm going to have on Shaman Dennison and Stephanie Suiters. I butcher people's names, from the Thames Society Paranormal Investigation. It'll be from 10 p.m. to midnight again, my usual time. Hopefully, they're still trying to get some evidence to me. We might have some of their evidence from their paranormal group to show. I can't wait. Joy, definitely being a joy having you on the show.
Thanks so much. Look forward to being on your show again.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to talk about UFOs next time.
Sounds good.
Knew I wasn't going to get to it in 2 hours.
Well, we can do that, though. That'd be great.
All right, awesome. And shout out to the chat room. Thank you guys. Aaron, Belkey, Jamie, my friend Jamie, Bill Perry, Sandy DeLong, Putty Cat, Christy Goins. I'm looking at everybody that's in there now. Diane Hilbert. Thank you guys. PSPI, Ghost Hunters, Starry Night. Oh, man, there was a lot of people in the chat room. And there was trolls, too. Whatever. If they want to watch, hey, I don't care. Thank you to Jamie and Sandy for being chat room moderators tonight and kicking them out for me. Everybody, have a great night. See you next Sunday. Thank you guys again. I knew this would be a controversial show tonight. Just remember, future reference for next paranormal shows coming up, I'm always going to have guests on that are going to have different views, different ways of looking at things, and I'm always going to be an open mind to all of it. That's what the show's about, and that's what I love about having Dr. Joye on. I might not agree with everything she believes or says, but you know what? She hit a lot of truths tonight, a lot of stuff I've discovered in the past, and I wanted to get this information to you guys. Go look for yourself. Go do the research. She gave you a lot to start with. I will see you guys next Sunday, 10 p.m. to midnight, with Shaman Dennison and Stephanie Suter, I get the name wrong, from Thames Society of Paranormal Investigations. Everybody have a good night. See you next week.